Stan, we're live.
And welcome to a special Friday afternoon edition of In the Dugout. I am your host, Mike Stenhouse, and because we're in the dugout, we got to wear a cap. So I'm going to go with the Team America cap today, if that's okay with you. And if you join in on the Zoom, or if you, I guess if you join in on the Zoom visually, it wouldn't do you any good to wear a cap if you were just calling in, would it? So, but feel free to wear your own. Now, this is also a special. In fact, I'll share the call-in information with you in a minute. But this is also, we're going to set this clear. Friday editions, cocktail hour comes a little early. So whenever we do a Friday version of In the Dugout, it's Friday cocktails with Mike Stenhouse and In the Dugout. So whether you're calling in or Zooming in or just watching from home or commenting in the comment section, we want you to join us in a cocktail. So let me partake of a little vino here. And this is a special one. This is a Saperavi grape from the country of Georgia, which they call the birthplace of wine. If you'd like to know more about that grape and the great 9 red wines they have, friend of our centers is distributing that wine. Let me know privately and we'll get you some information. But you can look it up, the Saperavi grape from the country of Georgia. This one's one of their sweeter ones. I tend to be a little bit more on the dry guy, but please join us in a cocktail. Now remember, the cocktails, as we've seen, are also a way to sort of do a COVID test. If you can smell it, yep, and you can taste it, yep, then you probably don't have COVID. So it's important that you do, especially in the weekends, you do a lot of self-testing. Self-testing, very important on the weekend. It doesn't even have to be an alcoholic beverage, just any beverage, just do a lot of self-testing. Okay, today on the show, we're going to spend a few more minutes talking about the Wednesday riots, demonstrations, and our position on that. We're going to clarify that in just a second. Then we're going to spend maybe 15, 20 minutes, and I would love you to weigh in on this part. In fact, if I can find while we're talking, I'll try to find the graphic that shows you how you can call in or Zoom into the show. But I really would like your feedback on this today. So here it is. Here's how you can join the show and join the conversation. Well, we're going to spend about 20 minutes talking about Gina Raimondo as the nominee now as Commerce Secretary for under the Biden administration. We put out a media release today with the title "A Downgrade for America, an Upgrade for Rhode Island," and then we listed. Sadly, but truthfully, a long list of economic and management wreckages left in the wake, that will have been left in the wake of the Gina Raimondo 6 years as governor. At the end of the show, the final half of the show, we'll have our favorite doctor on, Dr. Andrew Boston, who will talk to us about everything COVID. We'll be looking at some recent data from Rhode Island. We'll ask him about vaccines a little bit. We'll ask him about the new British strain that apparently is starting to take hold in the country. Is that worse or better than where we are now? Who the heck knows? But we want you to, any of those last 2 segments, the Gina Raimondo segment or the with COVID segment, please feel free to either Zoom in at this call number or call in at this number down below. All right. So back to Wednesday's proceedings, or whatever you want to call them, in D.C. I got a call early this morning from our guest from yesterday, Ray Rickman. Ray Rickman is one of my favorite people in the world. He's a devout liberal. We disagree on almost everything, but we agree that discourse must happen. And we even know how to kind of zing it to each other and still love each other at the end of the day. He called me this morning disturbed at me, Mike, I just have to talk to you a little bit more about your views on Wednesday's proceedings. It's a lot of people I've talked to, just can't believe that you would condone violence or would hold anything close to that. And he wanted to understand where we're coming from. I mean, that's awesome that he would reach out to me like that. I said, well, okay, Ray, I'm glad you're calling, because that's not true. But if that's what's perceived out there based on what we've said on our prior two shows, then we need to fix that. I need to address that. So I'm not going to go into a long dissertation here, but I am going to talk to you a little bit. I am going to summarize exactly where we stand on Wednesday's proceedings. And I'm going to be really direct and blatantly honest with you at the risk of subjecting myself to criticism, but then I'm going to separate so you know where I draw the line and where I don't. My initial reaction to what I saw, and this goes before I realized there was any violence, was pride that Americans were speaking up, not hurting people, not vandalizing, just making their presence known. That's what I said. And that's what I felt. That's what I felt about the peaceful protest that I was witnessing. Don't forget, when most of the violence was happening, we were live on the show, and I didn't see, it wasn't until after the show that I realized. So I want to separate the two. The hundreds of thousands of people that went to DC to demonstrate, be seen, to be heard. I want to separate them from the few hundred or few thousand people, probably just a few dozen people, who caused the violence. The gray area is the occupation of the Capitol grounds. And don't forget, I went to Harvard in the mid 1970s, and just a few years before that, they had sit-ins at Harvard. Students occupied buildings. They're praised for that. They probably pushed past a few security guards to occupy the buildings, but there was no violence. There were no injuries, as far as I know. I don't know, but I'm not sure. But I think that's a way. That's a gray area. But even that, if they just peacefully removed a few barriers, didn't hurt any police, and occupied the grounds, I might be okay with that. But I'm still separating that from just the hundreds of thousands that were there. And I want to further qualify, why were they there? So that's what I want to focus on today. Why were 200,000 or more people there in Washington, D.C.? We haven't gotten a real count, but it looked like a hell of a lot of people. Why were they there? They weren't there to storm the Capitol grounds. They weren't there to riot. They went there to support, in my view, freedom. And I was listening to a talk radio show today, and sometimes the simplest words can explain things the best. And one woman called in. She says, I was at that rally, not because we are Trump, but because Trump is us. Yes, Trump made a big mistake last election by not repeating what he stressed in his first election. I am your voice. You are the forgotten men and women who appreciate freedom in this country, and I will be your voice. I am you. It wasn't about Trump. It was about liberty, freedom from an oppressive government. We are not Trump. Trump is us. That's why those people were there. Somebody was speaking on their behalf. Somebody was listening to them. Somebody appreciated the long train of abuses, as I detailed yesterday, that we as a people have gone through this past year at the state and federal level. A long train of serious abuses. And it's not right, and it's altogether American and proper that a free people should want to raise up and be heard against that kind of thing. Now, when you start breaking down barriers, when you start injuring police, when you start vandalizing federal property. No. All right, can I be any more clear on that? No. What I was talking about is what motivated those people to go to DC in the first place. I think those were pure and honorable and truly American intentions. And let me also finish with this. I meant to bring this up with Ray Rickman yesterday. I didn't, and I didn't have the chance this morning when we talked. But I also want to make a Martin Luther King analogy. You know, I mean, we all at least remember, or we remember hearing about the massive crowds, peaceful crowds, yes, that he attracted to Washington, D.C. Now, were they there to honor him? Or were they there because they wanted civil rights and equality under the law? What was the larger issue? Martin Luther King or the fight for civil rights? Clearly, in the same way that I just said Donald Trump was speaking for Americans when it comes to freedom, Martin Luther King was speaking to African Americans and many, many, many more when it came to the need, justified moral need for racial equality and civil rights justice. It's larger than the person. The rallies in the 50s and 60s by Martin Luther King was about something much bigger than Martin Luther King. And the demonstrations we saw in DC, at least what motivated the people to go there, was much bigger than Donald Trump. They didn't go there to riot, to hurt people, to destroy property. When you're in a mob, and we do know now that there were instigating Antifa or left-wing elements designed to either lead or, you know, try to motivate the crowd into taking more violent action. We don't know how much of that is true, but I can tell you those people went there with the honest intent, with a love of freedom, and Donald Trump just happened to be the person who was speaking on their behalf. Okay, enough of that. So that clarifies it. I'm separating the two. Why the masses went there versus the bad things, unjustifiable things that the rioters did on the Capitol. Okay, clear enough? Separate those two totally. Okay, let's go to Gina Raimondo. So first, I guess we congratulate her as human beings. It's quite an honor to be nominated to serve in the United States cabinet, especially in a position as high ranking as Commerce Secretary. But I got to tell you, I think she's the absolute wrong choice. So our center put out a statement today, which we're going to go through. And again, I invite you to, let me share this one more time. Invite you, I really would like your feedback. I would like to know if you share our center's views on why her appointment would be a downgrade for America, but the silver lining being maybe an upgrade for Rhode Island. So I just shared the wrong item with you. But I do want you to, I would love to hear your thoughts, because we were pretty tough on her in our release. We laid out, which I'm going to go through with you in a second, a whole list of failures economically, management-wise of Raimondo. Don't forget, she's going to be managing a large department as well. It's not just about economic policy, it's commerce director. Can be managing, and you know, so we have to look at her management skills too. And I also laid out the just complete downgrade of qualifications compared to current Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross. So let me share our media release with you today, which is on our website. So this went out about 10:15 this morning. And this is the media release and our statement. And I want to go through it in some detail with you, and I would love you to call in or Zoom in and let me know what you think. A downgrade for America is an upgrade for Rhode Island. And don't forget, we were the first ones to break the story. Our DC sources, back in November, so I talked about it right on this show, right on this, in the Dugout blog. I talked to her right on this show that we heard that she was going to be the pick for Commerce Secretary. Of course, nobody else ran with it. Why should they? We're not a trusted media entity, but when we put information out, you can count on it being pretty much true, unless they tell you there's some question about it. So we put that out on the show, and in that show, I went through just the pitiful comparison between her credentials and the credentials of Wilbur Ross, who helped engineer under Donald Trump the American economy to the greatest performance of any economy in the history of the world. It's true. You may hate Trump, but it's true. So Gina Raimondo in the private sector, pretty much, she's got her degrees from Harvard and Yale and all that stuff. And she had some experience as a partner at a venture capitalist firm, which is okay, but it wasn't a lot of experience. And she didn't directly grow and build a business, that in the market-based business anyway. Venture capital is an important part of our society, so I don't want to downplay that. Really no hands-on experience in running, like we said, a marketplace business. Just look at these credentials of Wilbur Ross, who became a Wall Street icon, U.S. international experience, chairman or lead director of more than 100 companies in more than 20 different countries. This is Wilbur Ross. I'm not going to, he's going to be out in a few days, so we're not going to spend too much time. But again, just when you look at it from a credentials and hands-on experience point of view, Gina Raimondo is going to be a major downgrade from Wilbur Ross. So what are Gina? So not so much her resume credentials. And by the way, don't forget, it is Cocktail Friday. Good. Saperavi grape. But what has Raimondo done for Rhode Island? And maybe we took a one-sided view on this, but she will talk about how the unemployment rate was improved as much as any other state, and that may be true, but it's kind of a misleading data, because as we saw when this pandemic hit, the new jobs that were created in this state were so weak, were so fragile, were so low paying, that they were the first to go when the pandemic hit, and retailers and other businesses had to shut down. So while there might have been jobs created under her and our state's unemployment rate improved, there's no question with all these other things we're about to go through that was a house of cards. And as soon as the pandemic shutdowns hit, that house of cards did collapse, as we would have predicted. And Rhode Island has suffered job losses and gross domestic product losses as great than almost any other state in the country, relatively speaking. So here we go. Let's just go through the what I call the long train of wreckage under Gina Raimondo's Rhode Island, regularly ranked as having the worst business climate in America. I mean, that's CNBC. We can't say anything about that. She destroyed and kept destroying tens of thousands of jobs and thousands of businesses, many of which will never recover, with her constant, persistent, and ultimately ineffective shutdown. Again, just yesterday, Rhode Island had the second highest per capita infection rate of anywhere in the world, any state, any other country. And at the same time, we suffered massive. When you lose both economically and medically, that's not good. It would be one thing to say, well, listen, we suffered economically, but look, we really did stop the spread. She failed on both counts. It would be good you could trade one for the other, but you failed on both. You failed from a health perspective, we failed from an economic perspective. Same thing. The over $1 billion of CARES Act money was sent to this state to help, primarily to help education and struggling businesses. And Gina Raimondo gave out pitifully low amount to regular businesses. Instead, she wanted to use the funding to fund the massive state budget gaps that have been a persistent problem since she's been governor. Refused to give the money to the small businesses it was intended to go to and who are struggling so much. You might be one of them. Call in and let me know. The Providence public school system, a disaster. Do you remember a few years ago? I mean, Rhode Island, again, nationally shamed with that prestigious Johns Hopkins Institute report, and then the Wall Street Journal calling Providence schools a horror show. Gina Raimondo, her appointed education commissioners, refused to challenge the unions, the teachers' unions, refused to enact the reforms that are necessary to actually help kids. Instead, she did things that only helped the adults. And to this day, Providence public schools are indeed a horror. Nothing to improve them in 6 years. She's an energy, climate change activist. There's pretty much no Green Deal issue item that Gina Raimondo won't go for. She called for Rhode Island to be what? Carbon free within how many years? 2030 was it? 2035? I don't know. But you know, whether it's, you know, and now she's trying to push. It was made Rhode Island one of only 3 states right here, one of only 3 states to sign on to this TCI gas tax. The purpose of the TCI gas tax, remember what that is to make gasoline so expensive that people and businesses will drive less. They want to punish you for using your vehicles for your family and work lives. So as Commerce Secretary, my goodness, I mean, businesses, the mileage and gas and costs of gasoline that businesses incur in their vehicles. And she's going to be open to, and if not encouraging, these kinds of taxes. In fact, this is a big question for Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee, who will probably soon become our governor. Will he keep Rhode Island in this multi-state compact, or will he show some mercy to the small businesses he says he listens to and he held many meetings on? Will he show them some mercy and remove this TCI gas tax or remove Rhode Island from this TCI gas compact? We'll find out. You remember the failed UHUP. This is management now. A little bit economics. Raimondo's catastrophic and failed rollout of that UHIP, United Health Infrastructure Project. And that meant that many deserving recipients of public benefits either never received them or got severe delays in receiving them, or had to jump through hoops and reapply in order to receive. I mean, you remember that. The data that was corrupted and lost caused massive confusion. Tens of thousands of Rhode Islanders lined up for blocks for hours just to get enough public assistance so they could survive. The one story, one woman turned to prostitution because she couldn't get a public benefit. And this, she was so committed to this big government benefits database that they were creating, that she defied the federal government, who said, do not launch that because it's not ready for prime time. And she launched it anyway. You have a cocktail? Gonna have a cocktail every now and then. On the Friday shows, a disaster, UHIP. Just think of what the other thing she's done. You know, she's going to be Commerce Secretary. She's led efforts to impose oppressive minimum wage. Even this year, even with businesses struggling, many of them near death, trying to survive, she wants to raise the cost of hiring minimum wage workers. And it's not just minimum wage workers, because everybody's salaries, or everybody's, at least hourly wages are pegged to the minimum wage. So if the minimum wage goes up for the bottom rung, you got to move the middle and upper rungs up too. This is a disaster coming out of a pandemic. What is going to be the thinking when she's Commerce Secretary for all of America? The trucker told that looks like she's going to lose in courts. I think she was smart to get out of here because she's going to lose that case. It looks like the truckers won a major victory just a few months ago in this, moving this case forward. This was a clear violation of America's sacred dormant commerce clause, in the United States Constitution. Gina Raimondo didn't care. She needed money. And businesses, truckers, and ultimately you, because it raises the cost of every product and good that is shipped via truck, it hurts you. But the one group of businesses Gina Raimondo was happy to help were the insider cronies. Got the big handouts, tack your money, our money, to give them an unequal competitive advantage against the other small businesses. Even in this pandemic, the rumor is, and it makes sense, the Walmarts, I don't know, just think of the other big businesses, the big chains that can withstand issues. Can withstand higher costs. Lobbied her to shut down the small businesses, but to keep the big box stores open, the Home Depots. We remember one of the first story. Why can I go buy flowers at a Home Depot in their garden shop or Lowe's, but I can't go to just a regular flower shop and buy it, or plant shop? You remember that last spring? That's favoritism to the big business. The Democrats, this is the thing, the Democrats have become the party of the big business. It used to be thought that Republicans with their lower taxes were the friends of big business. Now it's the Democrats. Policies that favor them, that give them a competitive advantage, allow cheap illegal immigration into the country. This is why Democrats have become the party of big business and cronies. And Gina Raimondo is as good at that as anybody. This one, not many people knew about. But it was about maybe 2 years ago. She helped usher through a bill that would threaten the, I can't even think of how many, 5,000-7,000 workers in the private home care industry. She wanted to compete against them with a government-sponsored union SEIU version of their own healthcare workers that would pull people away, pay them. Well, you can't compete with the government; they can pay them anything they want. Larry, one more, and then we'll get to your call. So that was a total capitulation to SEIU and the government sector unions, who were dying for more members since the Janus decision. And finally, DCYF. As far as I'm concerned, and we haven't studied this, so I'm going to leave a little leeway here, but we know that children continue to die under state care because of incompetence and lack of reform at the Department of Children, Youth, and Family. Friends, this is not a track record that America should be proud of. I hope forces in DC expose this record during her confirmation hearings, and then we'll see what happens. I'm not saying I'm openly rooting against her to be confirmed, but if she is to be confirmed, they ought to know the truth about what's going on. All right, Larry the Liberty Guy is here. First of all, you got a cocktail?
I absolutely do. I've got some old Platini Scotch. So it's a single malt Scotch founded in 1826. Delicious stuff.
All right, what do you got for us here?
Just first off, just reading over this list, it's just unbelievable how many shameful things that is going on in our state, and the chat's going absolutely wild in agreement that this is bad for Rhode Island. We have Roland on the
No,
line.
wait a minute. Good for Rhode Island.
Good for Rhode Island, bad for America.
Bad for America.
Bad for America. Bad
We got
for
Roland on the
all
line?
these bad things. Yeah, we got Roland on the line. Let's bring him in. Roland, unmute yourself.
Roland, are you there?
Hello? Yeah,
Hey,
I just
Roland.
had to unmute my, yeah. Hi, yeah, Mike, I was actually going down the list as you
Wait a
were.
minute. You got a cocktail in hand?
No, I'm sorry. It's
All right,
kind of a
all right.
dry, yeah, our household is a dry household.
All right,
You
go
wanna call
ahead.
it that.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so anyways, as you were going down the list, the thought come to mind, I don't disagree with anything, of that list. As a matter of fact, I don't think it was actually critical enough, but I recall an article probably about 2 years ago in Forbes magazine. Do you remember that one? They called her one of the top 75 influential people
Yeah.
in the world.
Yes, I do.
All right. Yeah. That's one thing I noticed. I realized that had nothing to do with the,
Well, see,
you know,
this
with
is-
the, with,
Bro, that's a great point because that was you've seen criticism and news. You know, she's how many people she's got in her communications department. They have built up her image.
Yeah.
You know, that image was formed, and maybe rightfully so when she got some reforms done to the crushing state pension system. You know, when she was treasurer. And she became the darling of Wall Street. The Wall Street Journal loved her. Like Bloomberg fell in love with her because she was happy to promote a anti-Second Amendment agenda, and he funded a lot of her campaigns and money.
yeah.
But that's a great point that they have worked very hard to build her national image, and it's long been known that she's been you want to go to DC under a Hillary Clinton presidency, and now looks like
Yeah.
she's going under a Biden presidency. So yeah, that's a great point.
Well, yeah, no, well, that's the, if you notice what we would consider the failures, I mean, if you were to split that list that you have, half of it has to do with economics. The other half has to do with social justice items, you know, like the TCI,
Yep.
especially the abortion bill, the minimum wage, getting the unions on board. It's all been paying favoritism, actually, with what I would say is the created division under the Trump administration, because that's all we've heard for 4 years, how divisive he was. They never talked about his accomplishments. And one of the ways to stand out from the crowd is forget about the economics. Forget about the economics. To get noticed on a national stage is to go with these issues that are considered,
All right, great point.
divisive. And that's what I think. That's why I think it doesn't matter about the HSS. It doesn't matter that she killed businesses. What matters is she stood out from the others. Now, if you notice, there ain't a whole hell of a lot of difference between her and Governor Whitmer or
Wow.
Kate Brown out of Oregon.
All right, Roland, I'm going to comment on that. Then we're going to get to Andy Boston, Dr. Boston, who's on the line as soon as I'm done. But you bring up an awesome point. So let me rephrase what you just said. You're right. It doesn't matter to Joe Biden because Joe Biden is a political animal. He made it clear when he said we're going to have more women and more minorities in our cabinet than anybody. He made it clear that politics was his first concern when putting together his cabinet. Identity politics, not qualifications. And Gina Raimondo has played the political game as well as any of them. She has implemented every one of Obama's and plans from Obamacare on down. She became head. She went with the anti-2A movement. She, as we said, she went with all the lockdowns like the other blue governors. And she, in a way, she earned her political stripes in the Democrat Party by running the National Democratic Governors Association for, I think, was it a 2-year term? So she has been a political animal. That's what we said in our release. I think we said that up here. Where she became known as a Democrat hyperpartisan. Wilbur Ross worked for both Republicans and negatives, and Democrats. And Gina Raimondo has been a political animal, and Joe Biden is a political animal. Joe Biden has no values. Joe Biden has no principles. Joe Biden has no economic philosophy or plan. Joe Biden goes where the political wind blows him. So of course, he's going to promote people who have no real world experience but have political alignment with him. Final point before we get to Dr. Boston, just to finish this. We are hopeful that Dan McKee, future Governor Dan McKee, will follow through on his many outreach efforts. I don't know that he's had any real impact yet, but he's been holding small business conferences and forums for years and years. He says he appreciates the small business community. Now is his time to do something about it. He will now have, and the first thing we're asking him to do is to pull Rhode Island out of this insidious transportation climate initiative. That's TCI gas tax. It's going to raise gas taxes in the next few years up to 23, 25, 27 cents a gallon to force you to drive less. So that would be a great move if he would come out of the box. Okay, Roland, thank you as always. All right, we're going to spend the rest of our show. We're bringing back our great friend, Dr. Andrew Boston. Andy, how are you today? Andy, are you there? There he is. Unmute. There you go. Whoa. Try again. Nope. We have no audio. Is all messed up. Video is good, Andy. You sound like a record player on 700 speed. Why don't you hang up and try zooming back in again? Because something's definitely wrong with this connection. All right, we'll be back. So we're going to talk to Andy today. By the way, Larry the Liberty Guy, did you ever get that third chart from him?
We asked for it. Hopefully he gets it over to us.
All right. We're going to go over recent data with Dr. Boston from Rhode Island. We're going to talk about vaccines. We're going to talk about the British strain. We're even going to look at, not that it has any real medical relevance to our regular lives, but I'm also going to review with Dr. Boston some of the what I think are interesting ethnic breakdowns, and just see if he has any thoughts on that.
Does it work?
Andy, there you go, much better.
Hi.
All right, so we got two requirements today. Do you have a cap or do you have a cocktail?
On
Fridays, it's cocktails.
Okay, I have a cap.
All right, he's got the Yukon Huskies
Yukon
cap.
cap.
Yep, and then all right, but no cocktail today. All right, every Friday is cocktail. When we do a Friday show, it's cocktails. Okay.
So I just wanted to sort of give a year-end review.
Great.
The data from Rhode Island for this past year just really highlight how this is a disease of the frail elderly. Worldwide overall, and certainly in our state. So 69.5% of the deaths were in nursing homes or elder assisted living facilities. 59% of deaths were among those who are 80 years old or older, 27% in those who are 90 years of age or older. And the 59% of deaths in those 80 years old or older are occurring at just about the mean Rhode Island life expectancy, which is actually slightly over it, which is 79.9 years. In contrast, only 18% of the deaths have occurred in those less than 70 years old, versus a total of 82% in those greater than or equal to 70. So if you look at the crude mortality, all comers for COVID-19, in those less than 70, it's a crude rate of 34 per 100,000. In those that are 70 and older, in contrast, it's 1,174 per 100,000. or 35 times the rate of those that are under 70. So, you know, I think this always, you know, needs to be emphasized, Mike, in considering the lockdowns, especially in light of the you know, the vaccination program that's underway. And the vaccination,
We'll get to that in a little while. Yeah.
yeah, the vaccination program, it really at this point is minor in comparison to all the people that have already been infected in the state, who are conferring herd immunity. So the fact that you mentioned that the lieutenant governor who took over for Raimondo is allegedly business friendly. I mean, these are the kinds of data that need to be presented to him. Is he going to continue to restrict the working population of the state at a, you know, which is under economic duress and has been under economic duress before COVID? Given data like these and the fact that there's an active immunization program going on now on top of all the infections that have already occurred.
I agree. All right, we got a bunch of questions and charts to go through with you. Let me just start with this. This you haven't seen. I mean, but I just want to comment on this. You know, because remember, we first talked to you an unhysterical look or analysis of the pandemic, right? But the media just loves to play this up. And one thing I notice is they love Mondays, or they love days after 3 or 4 or 5 days of not reporting data like we had over the Christmas and New Year's holidays, so they can aggregate and put up these really big, scary numbers as headlines. Like, look at all these deaths. Look at all these cases. Right. I mean, doesn't this just feed into the false hysteria, Doc?
Well, it's also a misrepresentation of the data, Mike. You know, I've been, and I don't understand how this has filtered. You know, there's a lot of things that are very different about fundamental epidemiology that are being misapplied to COVID-19, unheard of before this pandemic. And one of them is that you only report deaths. I mean, they only make sense when you report them by the day they occurred. And the idea, the idea that you can aggregate deaths sometimes, now Rhode Island is typically not as guilty as other states, but there are other states, particularly New York and New Jersey, that for months would aggregate deaths over the summer when they were reporting over the summer that had occurred back in the spring. And they call them new deaths. Well, they're new in the sense that, you know, for whatever reason, they're first becoming adjudicated. They're reaching you know, they're becoming acknowledged. That's very different, Mike, than, this is how you're supposed to break the deaths down on the day they actually occur.
All right, so let me hold on one second, because I just got to do it. So you know, this is when the director of health, Nicole, loves to get out there. Sadly, we have, you know, 24 new deaths to report today. Only 4 occurred yesterday, but there are another 18 that we discovered that occurred in past months. I mean, that is so purposely hysterical.
Well, right? but it's worse than that when you look at the face page of the website. They use this Orwellian term, since we're living Orwell now overall, of new deaths. Well, new deaths, the ordinary person looks at the website and says, oh, they must have occurred in the last 24 hours.
Those new deaths are 6 weeks old.
Right. And so but I've never, as an epidemiologist, there's no such thing as date of recording. It doesn't mean in other words, Mike, how would you graph it? Because it's not occurring on a specific day. What the hell does it mean? It's a meaningless term.
Well, what it proves is that this whole, listen, the pandemic is real, but the hype about it is the fake news. Not the pandemic is not the fake, but the hype and the way they position it is the fake news. And if only we could have a real look at this thing, right?
Well, the other thing, Mike, that continues to plague, you know, even attempts at honest recording, is the idea of what's designated as a coronavirus death.
Right.
So this is scandalous. the only state that has formally audited the death certificates, Florida, back over the summer, came out with a report that was just stunning to read, where you could see that license was given where anyone who tests positive within a 30-day period can be designated a coronavirus death. And there was a very interesting report by John Solomon's Just the News this past week.
Good reporter, yeah.
Relevant to Rhode Island. The Rhode Island Department of Health actually admitted, in terms of hospitalizations, but of course this carries over into designation of death, that these hospitalizations, and you'll show it at some point. Mercifully, they're coming down by date of hospitalization. The census in the hospital by day is coming down, which is very good news. The Rhode Island Department of Health spokesperson admitted that hospitalizations that are COVID include anyone with a positive test, regardless of what medical problem actually brought them to the hospital. And so, but there are serious medical problems which bring people to the hospital.
Right.
If you have a serious medical problem, non-COVID, which brings you to the hospital and you die, it is within the rights, given this destruction of the coding system, to categorize that as a COVID-19 death because you tested positive. So if you're a frail elderly person that's admitted with urinary tract infection and sepsis, and you happen to test positive for COVID and you expire, you could be designated a coronavirus
Well,
death.
the joke is the Nashville suicide bomber was designated a COVID death. So
it's really look, there's a whole category of death by trauma in the CDC database that I think is now probably close to 10,000 deaths.
Yeah. All right, let's go through some charts. So first, here's this is not your chart, but here's a chart of positive cases by day. All right, any comments there?
Well, again, I never like looking at the cases because it's very much dependent on the test volume. So what I typically like to use is what I sent to you, which is the percent positives. And you have to say that there was a slight uptick after the holiday, but we don't, because Mike, one of the other things that we pointed out is because we don't know what the cycle threshold distribution is in that group of positives. Is that really something to be concerned about? The fact that it had plummeted for a couple of weeks and then it was back up again. Here's a positivity chart that Channel 12 puts out. I like to go to them, so you can see it's been up and down, pretty much staying above that 5% threshold. Dip down a little bit, but up and down below there. All right. Next, let's go to hospitalizations. So picture those spikes in positivity, and now let's look at hospitalizations. Right, and that's one of the most reassuring things that we can say is that since the peak that we saw about a month ago, it's coming down, and it certainly reached a plateau, but now it genuinely looks like it's coming down, and that's a good thing. And that's, again, Mike, that's despite the license that's given to label anyone that's coming to the hospital with a positive test a COVID hospitalization.
Right, same questions there. Why are they there? How are they coded? And then here's the deaths.
And the same thing with deaths. Deaths certainly seem to have reached a plateau. It's going to take a little while to make sure they're actually coming down, but the trend overall appears to be positive, that deaths are coming down. And again, we're still not even dealing with what's designated.
All right. So why would you say those are happening? So we have cases still fairly high, but as we've talked many times, but the ratio of hospitalizations and deaths is going down. Do you think it's because we're treating it better, or do you think
I think it's a combination of things? High
cycle threshold, almost false positive cases out there. What would you think is the reason for this?
It's truly a composite. You have to look at improvements in treatment and availability of treatments, everything from monoclonal antibodies to perhaps remdesivir Sadly, still there's not a lot of outpatient community treatment with hydroxychloroquine or
Ivermectin.
the other antiparasitic agent that's been shown to be somewhat effective. But be that as it may, treatments are available. Treatments for more aggressive COVID, including steroids, are available and being utilized.
All right, talk to us about this British strain. Is that what do you know about that? How prevalent is it? Is it more dangerous?
It's been around for months and months. There are 3,000 strains, Mike. I don't think it's a major issue. It's another thing that people have glommed onto. But the other aspect of declining rates is once again the expansion of natural herd immunity. As more and more people are exposed and have mild disease, they become less. They are not going to be spreading it to those that are truly vulnerable. So that's the other aspect of this. And now we're going to slowly augment that herd immunity by vaccination. So all these things are coming into play now, and they're all good. And there's nothing, I don't understand the constant need for hysteria. When
if you want to stay in totalitarian power, you have to scare the people.
Well, that's more and more that appears to be a problem, and the totalitarian mindset that we see throughout society. COVID has been an incredible vehicle for that, and also the
COVID might have altered our elections.
Well, then the shutting down of honest discussion. I mean, why is it that traditional epidemiology has been shoved aside? Basic ideas about herd immunity, basic ideas. I found Mike. I don't know if you saw this. I think I did try and send it to you during the week. Just listen to this. This is the Sydney Morning Herald, which is like the flagship newspaper
in Australia.
Okay.
Yep.
This is April 2003. They were reacting to SARS-CoV-1. Okay, that the initial
2003. Okay,
that's right, April 2003. This is the title of the article. Farce mask, it's safe for only 20 minutes. And there were statements in here from the New South Wales. I guess that's where Sydney is. Fair Trading Minister was warned that I'm sure everyone agreed that it's un-Australian to profiteer from people's fears and anxieties, and she's talking about profiteering on masks. Then they quote a professor from the Department of Infectious Diseases at the University of Sydney. Those masks are only effective so long as they are dry. As soon as they become saturated with moisture in your breath, they stop doing their job and pass on the droplets. Well, how long does that take? 15 to 20 minutes. They were actually fining retailers who cash in on community fears about SARS by exaggerating the health benefits of surgical masks could face fines up to $110,000. There's nothing that's changed about the science of masks.
All right. So until you read this, and this is just astounding to me, and I'm mad at myself for not thinking. I was thinking that masks were just a way for the totalitarians to train us into being controlled by them. It's something we tell you to do, we get you to obey, and you'll do the next thing. I didn't think of the financial argument. There are some businesses and people that are profiting mightily off of these masks, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you and the advertising. It's not just the businesses producing them; it's all the advertising. But look at how this staid discussion took place in the face of what's a very similar, perhaps even more deadly coronavirus.
All right.
And the idea was that they were gonna fine people for exaggerating the benefits. Then they quote this couple. I'm sorry, this a pair of ladies who traveled to Asia. They had Asian destinations, and it says Ms. Taylor and traveling companion Joan Switzer had worn the masks during the trip home, even though they had been warned they were of little value. Quote, "We were told you need 16 layers on your face for it to offer 95% protection. And that's how the piece ends.
So Astro LaFond on our comments asked, does mask wearing actually deprive you of any kind of oxygen or even,
Well, that's very interesting.
or even have you breathe in more CO2?
Well, that's very interesting. There was one report which attempted to study this more rigorously amongst ICU nurses. And there they were dealing, they were willing, obviously, to wear N95 masks for their entire shift. They're dealing with highly infectious patients at close quarters for hours at a time. And they did note that they didn't desaturate. They can have pulse oximeters on them. They didn't desaturate in terms of their oxygen levels in their blood, but they did start to accumulate carbon dioxide, not to dangerous levels. And they also became quite symptomatic wearing these for the full shift, noticing some headaches, some inability to concentrate. But that's a very different situation. That's it's the best mask available, and they're with highly.
But there may be some truth to it that they're, regardless of the pandemic, they may not be healthy.
Absolutely. The other thing, Mike, I wanted to point out is that the largest registry study that's yet available, and this is where it really hits home, was just published this week out of Germany. And again, it's biased because it's parents who entered data on almost 26,000 kids. However, the analysis of these data showed that there was a lot of negative effects. 68% of the survey, those surveyed reported negative effects. 60% reported irritability, 53% headaches, 50% difficulty concentrating. Then more nebulous things like less happiness, 49%, reluctance to go to school or kindergarten, 44%, malaise, 42%, impaired learning, 38%, and drowsiness or fatigue. And this is in kids from basically less than 1 year of age to 18 years old. And it was the largest registry. But again, if these are very biased data, and you need something more rigorous. But it's and the tragedy of this is that that's the age group where right. I don't care. Any epidemiologist that's not an ideologue or a moron understands that this is a very benign disease for children.
Right. All right. We only got a few minutes left. I want to cover two more topics with you. We'll get to vaccines in a second. But I wonder if it would just quickly, even if maybe you don't even want to make an observation on this, but Channel 12 also puts out on that a chart of COVID-19 by race and ethnicity. Mm-hmm. And what I find interesting is you can see, for instance, we take this blue section here, that Hispanics are, that amount of the population, which looks like roughly an eighth, but they account for, maybe 3/8 of the cases, but even a smaller percentage, though, of the deaths. African Americans, Black over here, they seem pretty equal. But look at whites. Whites account for only half the cases right here, mm-hmm. but yet over 3/4 of the deaths.
I think that's the demography, though, Mike. I mean, so let's look within
more elder white people in Rhode Island.
Exactly. And I think that, but it also shows you that, again, it emphasizes the fact that in the younger working age population, it's a much more benign disease. I mean, that's the good news. In other words, you shouldn't be driving these people out of work. You should be doing a much better job of protecting those that are truly vulnerable. Right. Certainly the institutionalized elderly.
All right, last area, just while I put this graphic up just for fun, talk about, what do you have any more updated comments on the vaccines? There's a third vaccine coming out apparently soon, and anything about, the criticisms about the distribution of the vaccines, and just any thoughts overall on any of that.
Yeah, I what's happening is I guess we're beginning to see that, vaccines do have consequences. They're rare, but when you're vaccinating millions of people at this point, you're going to see some of the rare toxicities. There was a tragic case of a healthy obstetrician. Frankly, I don't even know why he got the vaccine, but because he was healthy in his 50s, who developed thrombocytopenia, which is in his case an absence of platelets, and had an intracranial bleed. Now this I don't want to alarm people. This happens routinely with vaccines that.
So you're still encouraging people to take the vaccine.
Yeah, I'm still encouraging, but the point is that there's been a whole series of adverse reactions, and people need to be aware of them. And I think it also should help us focus on risk benefit. The people that need to be vaccinated are the most vulnerable. There, God forbid, if there's a complication, at least you can rationalize it on the basis, well, but this is the population which can really suffer and die from the disease. So the risk of the vaccine, becomes much less in that population. Whereas if you're vaccinating completely healthy people who would get a mild form of the disease and build up their own immunity, and then you have a tragedy, that becomes a lot harder to justify.
If they have a choice, Pfizer, Moderna, the AstraZeneca is coming out. Does it matter?
I think the one thing and I guess Pfizer is working on this. The one thing that I know from the beginning in terms of distribution, which would be extremely advantageous in terms of Moderna, is that Moderna's vaccine did not require these -70, -80 storage conditions and then shipment on dry ice, et cetera. The Moderna vaccine could be stored
easier to distribute.
Yeah, it could be restored in routine freezers like anyone would have in their home or any clinic could have. And then I think can be refrigerated for about a week on top of that. So it should be easier to distribute. But as far as the other vaccines, I think we just know less about them. One last thing I would just to show you this craziness about lockdowns. Israel just started their third lockdown, but I just learned this week that Israel, because it has a very aggressive immunization program, they've already immunized 70% of the population above 60. Why on earth would you lock down again after you did that? What is it going to accomplish other than again, but these politicians, and including someone like Netanyahu, who for other reasons I respect, the allure of power is too much for them.
Control, yeah. Wow. Dr. Andrew Boston is always outstanding. We always have our largest audiences when you're on the show. So we're gonna keep going to you. You're obviously giving people information they have. Again, hopefully in the future we'll get more interaction and some more questions. But thank you for being with us today on a Friday.
And let's try and
even though you didn't share one with me now, I hope you have a copy.
Mike, I will have to talk about why that's not in my.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry to intrude.
I don't drink.
All right, sorry to intrude. Well.
It's not for alcoholism. It's for another reason.
All right. Well, there could be non-alcoholic.
And I love beer. It's not fun. It's not fun. Hopefully, I can tame it. I know I have a really bad case of GERD. It's coming more under control. But alcohol.
Yeah, you don't need to get.
Yeah, alcohol was too much, and I love my beer. So hopefully, it'll get controlled. And
Doctor, we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye-bye.
Okay, folks, once again, terrific show. We covered a lot of ground today. We covered the Wednesday riots. We covered Governor Raimondo being nominated as Commerce Secretary and our views on that. And then, of course, just some really good talk with Dr. Boston so we can kind of put some perspective on this real pandemic, but with fake hysteria to some degree, right? I think we all agree. Have a great weekend. If you have a cocktail, not too many, but do enjoy it like I'm enjoying this one. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.